Robert, thank you very much. Developing today, Massey Energy planning to complete the investigation into the April 5th mining blast that took the lives of 29 workers by the end of the year. The chairman and CEO of Massey Energy, Blankenship, joins us now for the very latest on his company and the future of mining. Mr. Blankenship, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. You announced it at the National Press Club. What specifically do you think Massey did wrong that needed to be corrected, and how have you corrected it?
Well, we really haven't figured out exactly what happened to know how to correct it. Of course, we're taking a lot of actions to improve our performance and hoping that when we find the actual cause of the explosion that we can deal effectively with that as well.
What are the various theories? There must be some circulating around based on some of the evidence you've gathered so far.
Well, I think the biggest theory is that there was a sudden gas inundation from somewhere, whether it was out of the floor or somewhere else, that sort of overwhelmed the ventilation and perhaps sparks off the shear caused the explosion. But we've not had enough exposure or even access to some parts of the mine, so there's no way yet to be sure what happened.
How much of the time and energy of Massey is now spent on investigating these tragedies as opposed to doing the business you're used to doing?
Well, there's quite a bit of it, admittedly. We've tried to sort of bifurcate our effort. Myself and the Chief Operating Officer are focusing on the tragedy and other issues, while our Chief Executive, Mark Clemens, or our Senior Executive, Mark Clemens, is running much of the day-to-day activity. So we think we've got it broken up in a way that we're still effective.
Can you put a percent? I mean, is it taking 20% of your time?
I would say it's taking 20 to 30% of my time, but it's taking an even larger percent of our Chief Operating Officer's time.
Now, I don't know how many people out there know this, but you started, correct me if I'm wrong in any of this, because you know how some of these bios are, but you started out as a union miner. You've got a very close personal vested interest in what happens not only in the mining industry in general, but in the lives of the miners, having been one yourself. Does that affect the way you do your business with Massey?
I think in some ways it does. I grew up in the area, worked in the coal mines to get through college, been in and around the mines for 30, 40 years. I think it affects how you look at coal miners. We are big believers in coal mining, proud of what we do, proud of our workers, and of course very concerned about their safety. And I live right there among them today in a little town of about 60 people, so it's heartfelt with us when we have an accident.
You have had, of course, dust-ups with unions before on various issues and so forth, but having been a union miner, you know it from both sides. Do the miners themselves come up to you, particularly after these accidents, and say, look, we're with you, or does this make them more inclined to go with the union against you?
I think that most often that increases their defense of us. I mean, I was amazed to have family members who had victims come up and express concern about me or the other executives, even in the midst of their sorrow. So it's a fine group of people in Appalachia. We all know what the challenges are around coal mining, and we work very hard at it together as a community. But a lot of the element in the union, if you will, is usually negative toward us because of the history you mentioned. In '85, we had a very violent strike, and we have primarily non-union mines.
What's happened with the union since the time that you were actually a union miner? Have they become more radicalized, less so, or do you have a better relationship with them, or worse, or what?
I think what happened over the years, their feather bedding and lack of willingness to accept technology and the promising of benefits that weren't being funded ultimately led to people recognizing that they weren't representing their own interest, and they declined rather rapidly in the United Mine Workers, much like they did throughout the country, but it was primarily because they left their members behind.
Now, you mentioned the new technologies in mining. Of course, people think of coal mine, they think of the actual coal. They don't think much has changed over the years. Well, a lot has changed over the years. And as we are scrambling as a country to gain our independence from the bad folks who have all the oil, a lot of folks are looking to coal and the new, cleaner technologies that you have for mining it and for burning it, thinking that might be the answer. But then you have the green folks who are very much against what you're doing. Who do you think is winning in that debate? The ones who say we got to focus on coal and make it cleaner, or the ones who are saying we got to phase out coal altogether?
Well, I think there's two different areas to look at. In Asia and the developing world, those that promote coal and see coal as a way to get out of poverty and hunger and and have a quality of life. Coal is winning big in this country. It's tying or losing. You know, it's a necessity and it needs to be done right, but some of the regulations that are being proposed and, you know, some of the surface mine rules are just outside the bounds of reason.
You say it's tying or losing. That surprises me because, again, with all the new technology, all of the hope that a lot of people have for coal, and certainly all the coal that we know exists here, one would think there would be a scramble for it. But you think the cap and traders are winning the argument?
Well, I think that if you look at the last year and a half, and you look at the next couple of years, the Environmental Protection Agency has taken off on its own on surface mine permitting and imposing rules on utilities and so forth, and putting so much uncertainty in the out years that the investments have slowed down in coal, and that's the reason I say that. I think that ultimately coal is a real jewel for the United States, and it'll be the answer to our energy problems.
Well, you know what's happened in the elections recently. A lot of the blue dog Democrats and so forth who initially were going along with the cap and traders now saying, no way, we want to win the next election. We're not going to if we vote in favor of cap and trade. Do you think that cap and trade will lose or win? You've got your eye on that target better than anybody.
Well, I would think that it will lose, although, you know, I've been surprised by a lot of what happens in D.C. over the years. The big thing about cap and trade is it's a tax on the poorest people. You know, the utilities become sort of a tax collector by imposing higher electric bills and passing it through for carbon credits and so forth. So it's all quite ridiculous, and it hurts the working people and the poorest of Americans the worst.
And finally, Mr. Massey, bringing it back to where we started, the families of those miners who died in the accidents, how are they being taken care of?
Well, they had excellent benefits to start with, and then, of course, we've offered plenty of settlements. We've tried to do everything we can to keep them informed and to take care of their short-term needs. You know, I think given the circumstances, we've handled it fairly well, but there's never any answer, if you will, to a tragedy like this.
Don Blankenship, please come back and see us again, sir. We appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you. Massey Energy CEO Don Blankenship. Well, some big names.